Since I was a little baby, my family always made it very clear to me that the mother who raised me, my stepmother, she wasn't my biological mother. My father, he even says that when he met my mother, she was a bit lost. She had a very abusive relationship at home with her parents. And my father took my mother to live with him at his house when she was still very young. I believe my mother was 16 when she got pregnant with me. After the pregnancy, and she spent the pregnancy at my paternal grandparents' house living with my father, she had me. Yeah, when I was about 4 months old, my mother was already feeling better and she started to change her behavior, right? She started hanging out with the friends she already had, and then one day she went out with a friend by car, along with some guys. It took her 3 days to come back. My dad was the one who stayed with me. I was still nursing, but my dad had to start giving me formula. I know that the story of my childhood is a bit complicated, but my dad always made it clear that my mom was a young woman. She was young, she was a teenager, she didn't really know what she was doing, and her parents were really bad to her, but she was a good person. But the phase she was going through when she got pregnant with me changed everything. It changed their whole story, right? After that, they ended up fighting a lot because my mom was acting out. My mom would go out. My dad found out that my mom was getting involved with other people, and they always made the story very clear, you know? And that's when my dad said he wanted to keep me. My mom kind of let me stay with my dad and my grandma, and she disappeared off the face of the earth. Since then, since I was 4 months old, my mom never showed up again. She never even asked how I was doing, never sent a message, never showed up just to say hi, never looked at me, not even from a distance or at any school meeting, quite the opposite. When I was 1 year and 3 months old, my dad met my stepmom, my current mom, who is the mom that raised me. And this woman, this stepmom, she was a very blessed person in our family. She married my dad in the church, and I was already a little older, so I walked in together with the little dog. She took care of me since I was a tiny baby. My dad would go to work and I would stay with her. She called me her daughter, treated me really well. And my father's family was always very, very loving and very humble. They always treated my stepmother really well. So we were a complete family and a happy family. They never hid my past from me, never hid my roots, never hid anything from me. And deep down, I never wanted to meet my mother, because in my mind, my mother was right there. My mother was the one raising me. She did everything for me. At school, the girls at school used to compliment my mom because I always went to school with a different hairstyle. So you can understand how much care she took with me. She was the kind of person that whenever my dad was going to buy something for me, she wanted me to have the best. I remember when I was about 5 or 6 years old, we went to buy a backpack, and she would say, "No, don't buy that one. This isn't the popular character now. This one is. All the kids at school will have nice backpacks," since I was going to a better school because my parents were better off. So I remember how much care she put into packing my school lunchbox. I remember that she liked making little sandwiches. She liked putting the little chocolate inside the wrapper. I remember the care she took with my little things when I was a child. I have so many wonderful memories with my stepmother. She was so amazing in my life. She was wonderful. Then, when I was 7 years old, right after my birthday, we were at my party. It was a party, and the theme of my party was Monster High, because I loved Monster High. Monster High was a really popular cartoon, and all my stuff was Monster High. Even my stepmother bought those pink hair pieces that you put on your head to look like the Monster High character, the one who had a pink streak. And it was really cool, and it was a very beautiful party. There were a lot of kids, and my dad had rented a party hall. And then suddenly, my dad told me he wanted to introduce me to someone, and he called me outside, and I went. And when I got there, it was a woman on my 7th birthday. And then he looked at me and said, "This is your biological mother." At that moment, when everyone is watching and there were cameras filming, there were people recording, all that tension about meeting my mother, that thing, that reunion, everyone wanting to see the reunion on the day of my party when I was 7 years old, I was left speechless. I remember that I couldn't put it into words myself. She was a stranger. Okay, my biological mother. Biological. I didn't even understand what biological meant. Biological mother. My mother was my mother, my stepmother. I never called her stepmother in my life. In my life, she was always my mother. Because she was the one who was with me. She was the most important person in my life. She was my stepmother. We used to play together. We played house, pretended to cook, and drew. She took such good care of me. So caring that it didn't make sense for that woman to say she was my mother. Mom, I know that at the time my dad was like, go on, give her a hug. I couldn't hug her. But then she came, she hugged me. I remember she hugged me. It felt like I was hugging a thorn. It was such a bad feeling I had. So, so horrible. She looked into my eyes, kissed my forehead, and said her dream was to meet me, be close to me, that she missed me and wanted to see me, and that she wasn't going to leave my side anymore. And to me, that was the same as hearing, you're going to watch horror movies forever, because that's what I was hearing, that I was going to watch horror movies in her life, because she hadn't been part of that phase of my life. And then she stayed. She sat at a table. Some people who knew her from when she was with my dad sat there and talked. And you could see that from afar, she looked at me like this. You could see her eyes shining, but I was afraid. I was afraid of her. I was afraid she would take me. I was afraid she would carry me away. I was afraid she would take me away from my real mom. I was afraid of what could happen from that point on. I wasn't happy. I remember I enjoyed my party. But from that moment when I looked into her eyes there in the doorway, maybe even to this day, it left an emptiness inside me. It's like when she arrived. She brought a bad feeling into my heart. The feeling was really weird. It was very strange. I remember we were singing Happy Birthday, and then she wanted to stand next to me. I didn't want her next to me. I wanted my mom by my side. So I stood my ground and told Daddy, I said, Daddy, I want you and Mommy here. And then he came pulling my ear and said, look, she's your mom too. And I said, but not today, Daddy. Please, not today. Please, Daddy, not today. Let my mommy be my mommy today, who was actually my stepmother. And my stepmother was always very quiet, you could tell. A lump in her throat. You could see the way she looked, holding back her tears, because she never mistreated my mom. She treated my mom well. She welcomed my mom. She brought her things. I remember my stepmother, my real mom, bringing snacks to my mom at the table, serving her soda. She was treated well. My stepmother treated my mom well. But it was very confusing for me. And then my dad let my stepmother and him sing Happy Birthday with me. But then he asked to sing Happy Birthday again. So now my biological mom would be by my side. And then my biological mom came. We sang Happy Birthday. But I remember I didn't even smile. I couldn't smile. I didn't even smile. I couldn't smile because it was too much. It was like, when you feel cold, someone comes close to you and you feel cold. I felt cold near her. It was a very strange feeling. From that moment on, my dad he started giving a lot of attention to my mom, and I started to see that my stepmom was upset, just so you know. I saw it. I was 7 years old, but I was pretty smart. I remember my stepmom one day. She was in the kitchen cooking, and she was crying a lot. I remember she was cutting something, and she would wipe her tears like this. And I went up to her and asked her, Mom, what's wrong? And then she bent down, looked into my eyes, and said to me, I've always loved you, and I always will, no matter what happens from now on. You have always been my daughter in my heart. We never lied to you about your mom. We always told you she exists, and it could be that one day she would come back, and she did. And now you're going to have to be strong. Because she wants to be close to you too, and that's something we have to accept. But you could see she was hurt, that she was feeling bad, that she wasn't okay because of this, that it was breaking her heart, and she didn't have to say that to me. On the contrary, she supported me being with my mom, but I didn't want to, so I hugged her. Then I said, Mom, you're my mom. And then she cried like this, sobbing. And she said, I know I'm your mom. You're my daughter. You'll always be my daughter. And that was the moment I still hold in my heart. That moment was really powerful, you know? Then my dad arrived, and he said that my mom wanted to get to know me better, and that we were going out, and that he would go with me so I could have that first meeting with her, because I really didn't want to go alone at all. We went to the ice cream shop near our house, and my mom, she was doing really well in life. She already had a car, a nice one. She was beautiful. She had nice clothes. You know, she paid for everything there, and she said, "Don't worry, I'll pay." And then she held my hand and said that I would never lack anything, that all those years she was away, it was so she could work and give me a better life, that she had found a good job, that she had married a good man, that I was going to meet my stepfather, that I was going to, her family, yeah, wanted to meet me, that her family wanted to have contact with me. They wanted to know who I was, that she felt really guilty. I think it was too much information for me, a 7-year-old child. I didn't want to know about any of that. You know, like I couldn't care less. To meet more people from her family. I already had my own family. I loved my grandparents, my stepmother's parents, they were my grandparents. Having to make more room in my life for someone who just arrived, even though I knew she existed, I didn't want to. I didn't want to. But I was too young to say, I don't want to. I just nodded my head and accepted it. What else could I do, right? And from that moment on, the whole process started. You know, because my mother didn't have custody of me, and then she went to court to be able to share custody, and then a war started inside my house because my father, he wanted to hand over custody, but he also felt that pressure from the family. The family, there were people in the family who supported it. There were people in the family who rejected it 100%. And then my life turned upside down. What used to be peace, used to be a united family, used to be a happy family. I had my dad and my mom. Now, in fact, I had my dad, my mom, another stepfather, my other grandparents, people who were never part of my life, who didn't see me grow up, but who wanted to make up for lost time with me. And everything started to change. From then on, yeah, I was kind of forced because the judge ordered it that I had to go to my mom's house on weekends. My mom kind of won in court against my dad, even though my dad had raised me until I was 7 years old. My mom managed to do it because she's my mother and because she was in a good situation. She hadn't done anything illegal. She wasn't involved in anything wrong. And she could. She had rights over me. She gave me life. So I had to start going to her house. Visiting her house was always a nightmare. But it wasn't because her house was bad. Deep down, the people liked me and wanted me around. They wanted to give me attention, love, and know about my life. But I was the one who didn't feel like I fit in that place. But the worst started to happen when I began going to my mom's house. And clearly, I couldn't play, I couldn't smile. She tried to cheer me up. I thanked her. But you know how it was. I was always kind of suspicious of her. She always gave me the doll, and I thanked her. But I thanked her with that forced smile on my face, because clearly I didn't want to be there. And everything started to get worse. When my mom bought the story, that I was like that because my stepmother was putting things in my head, that I shouldn't be friends with her. Guys, I was just a child. Today I understand that what I was going through was parental alienation. And then she started messing with my head. She started talking really badly about my mom to me, about my stepmother. Instead of bringing us closer, she made me resent my stepmother. I hated it. It broke my heart. Using all the knives from the kitchen drawer at home, it wasn't normal for her to talk about my mom like that, the one who raised me that way. She was good. She never tried to turn me against my mom. But how am I supposed to defend myself? At 7 years old, I would just listen. And that made it feel like my mouth was blocked. I couldn't talk. I couldn't eat. And I couldn't even cry. I was so angry, you know? And my mom would badmouth my stepmother. Then visitors would come to our house. My mom would say she was trying to see if I was going to live with her. Otherwise, I'd be angry with her forever because it was my stepmother's fault. She was the one who acted, but actually my stepmother hadn't done anything. She never said anything. I'd say, "No, Mom," but honestly, I didn't call her Mom. I used her name instead. But she forced me to start calling her Mom. And to avoid more fights, I called her Mom, even though I didn't want to. And my dad would say, "Call her Mom." My stepmother would say, "Call her Mom." And it was horrible because I would come back from her house. And I would tell everything to my dad, to my stepmother. And I cried so much. I cried so much. I cried so much, so much, so much. I begged, please, Daddy, I don't want to go to her house anymore. Daddy, please. And my stepmother told me to be patient, to be strong, to have courage, that things would get better, that things would get better, that things would get better. In short, I grew up surrounded by alienation. I grew up with my mom turning me against my dad and my stepmother, which doesn't make any sense. You know, I grew up with her trying to keep me away. Just so you know, at the time, my stepmother had created a social media account and she would post pictures of me. There were photos of me from when I was a baby. My mother sent a legal letter to my stepmother telling her to remove everything of mine from her social media. You know, like this made my stepmother suffer a lot. And it made me suffer a lot too because I saw my mother's pain and I wanted to be by her side. And not that woman who came back later, you know, but I had to stay in the middle of it, so I grew up like that. I grew up with my mom fighting with my dad, fighting with my grandparents, fighting with my mom, who is my stepmother, and my parents. Always defending myself from her, but never attacking, never attacking. And she would always bring it up everywhere, at the barbecue, at the birthday party, at the celebration. Wow, she made a scene at the school party once because I was going to do a Mother's Day presentation, and my dad went with my stepmother, just like my grandparents always went. In my story, before my biological mom came back, there was this thing like, she doesn't have her biological mother, so we're going to give her double the love. It was kind of like that. So my grandparents, my stepmother, my stepmother's parents, everyone had this affection and gave me so much love. And my mom started wanting to forbid the school from allowing my stepmother to be there. And then my mom would argue with the school, make a scene at the school, oh my, and me. I grew up with all of that. I grew up in the middle of the war between my mom and my stepmother and in the midst of parental alienation, where she tried to turn me against the other, and I grew up in the middle of that, but I had to pretend that I didn't care. Why? Because every time I showed anger towards my biological mom, she would go and do something to hurt my stepmother. So, what did I learn to do? What did my mom, my grandparents, my stepmother learn to do? We learned to shield ourselves. We learned to put on an act. And every time I went to her house, I had to rehearse. I had to rehearse. Like, I like you. Oh, how glad I am to have met you. Oh no, is that what I had to keep rehearsing? A bunch of things, even though I was just a child, to defend her and to protect my own family. So it was really messed up. It was really messed up until I turned 16 years old. When I turned 16 years old, things started to change because I already had more freedom. I would go out, stay at friends' places, and travel with them. No, it was great. My teenage years were really enjoyable. And that's when I decided that what I really wanted was my stepmother as my mother. And that the rejection I felt toward my biological mother had nothing to do with her. It's just that I started to clash with my biological mother. Really clash. That's when we had our first fight. I humiliated her with every word I knew. I said everything to her, everything I wanted to say, but I didn't even have the words to say it. This happened at my 7th birthday party. That she should never have come back, that she's not really my mother, that she abandoned me, that if she had loved me, because I was the same age she left me, I was the age she left me. If I got pregnant today, I'd handle it myself. I wouldn't be running around with some man like she did, right? That's it. That's it. That was what she needed to confirm that they'd turned her against me her whole life. Because she says that when my dad told me she was 16, that her parents kicked her out, that she went to live there, that she left me behind, my dad also alienated me. My dad also alienated me, that my dad put all these little things in my head, but that's the story and the truth. So it turned into a war between them, but my dad was telling the truth and my dad took care of me. And what about you? Are you trying to hide the past? It's my story. I deserve to know where I came from. I deserve to know. And my dad never lied to me. They always made it very clear that you were my mother. They always made it very clear that you left me behind. They never lied to me. But the one who raised me was the other one. And that was just like putting a knife in my mother's heart too. And then we started going to war. But from then on, I was no longer forced to sleep at her house. I was no longer forced to spend the weekend at her house. I wasn't forced to do anything with her anymore. And that's when I made it very clear to her that I didn't have a drop of love for her, that I didn't care at all about who she was, that she would never again do to me what she did my whole life, which was turning me against my father, turning my stepmother against me, trying to create drama and stir up trouble between the two of us. That from that day on, the one who would have all my love and affection would be the one who never abandoned me, which is my stepmother. That it was absurd. Because she made my stepmother delete the photos of me as a baby from social media. What kind of woman was she, you know? Like, besides abandoning me, besides leaving, she comes back and still wants to destroy the family that took care of me instead of being grateful. Whether I wanted it or not, all of this happened and I became extremely resentful. Since then, my relationship with my mom has never been the same. Actually, I never really had a solid relationship with her. You know, it was always forced to try to protect my own family. But when I really started wanting to talk, okay, maybe she believes it was alienation, but it wasn't deliberate alienation. My dad didn't talk to me about my mom to turn me against her. He was just telling me what happened. At no point did he say, if she shows up, you can't, I don't want you to, you'll disappoint me if you talk to your mom. They never turned me against my mom. But we only become aware of alienation when we become adults. Because then we see the side that always put bad ideas in your head, and we see the other side that always treated you with love and respect, or if both sides put bad ideas in your head too, right? But that wasn't the case with my family, right? So nowadays I'm like this. I have my biological mom, right? I treat her with respect. I call her mom. Sometimes I go there and talk to her. I'm a little more patient because now she's older and I'm an adult too, right? I have a different mindset. I'm in a relationship. We're planning to have kids. But I think to myself, I would never have left a child behind, you know? Even though she was young, she was a teenager, she had support. My father didn't want to marry her. My grandparents didn't accept her living in the house. So why did she abandon everything and leave me behind? Because she wasn't ready to be my mother. So she just comes back like nothing happened? I had a child, but I'm not ready to be a mother now. I'll come back in 10 years, then I'll be ready, and the child is just supposed to accept me? Guys, I just can't accept that. I just can't accept it. So I treat her well. I don't bring up this story anymore because every time I go there, she asks me for forgiveness. Whenever I go there, she tells me she loves me, compliments me, and wants to be with me. However, she holds a lot of anger and resentment toward my dad and stepmother, even though there's no reason for it. On my birthday, I remember my dad and stepmother treated her well. Otherwise, she shouldn't even have gone there. And then they even let me split my time with her. They let me start having this relationship, but it's really hard to see a mother like my stepmother being so good. Nowadays, we read so many stories about stepmothers who mistreat, who are mean, who compete, but my stepmother isn't like that. My stepmother, everything she did was be the mother I never had. And when my biological mother comes back, tries to take her out of that place, erase the photos, the smiles, the memories, no one will ever erase that from my memory. You can erase the photos, but what I have of her in my heart, there's no way you can erase that. It doesn't go away. No one will ever take it away. I'd have to hit my head and have an accident, get amnesia to forget who she was to me, you know? And even today, she's a great mom. She gave me siblings. She's a real partner to my dad. She's a friend. And today I even ask her for forgiveness, you know? I ask, oh, Mom, forgive me for putting you in this situation. And she always says that it was never my fault and it never will be, that I was the child in the story and that they gave me the best they could, you know? But it's full of pain and suffering. So today, whenever I tell this story, I try to remind people that even if you find your biological parents, you were raised by adoptive parents, and if you really want to meet your biological parents, be careful with what you might find. Be careful about what could happen to your own life. Your life can be turned upside down. And another thing, never stop loving those who have always given you love. I'm very grateful not only to my stepmother, but also to her family, who always treated me as if I were her biological daughter. They never treated me any differently from my siblings. I'm truly grateful that they never tried to put ideas in my head or turn me against my biological mother, you know? On the contrary, they always supported me, and that's the kind of support I want to carry with me, and that's what I want to give to my future children. Hi, Megadeth. How are you all doing? I'm sharing this story today because of parental alienation. Parental alienation is not considered a crime under Brazilian law, but rather a civil violation under the parental alienation law, aimed at preventing the psychological manipulation of a child to distance them from their parents. However, this practice leads to severe legal consequences. What does the law consider parental alienation? The law considers it parental alienation when parents, grandparents, or guardians interfere with the psychological development of a child or adolescent to induce them to reject or create negative feelings against another family member. Common behaviors include speaking badly about the parent in front of the child, making it difficult or preventing the right to visitation and contact, withholding important information such as school and medical records, making false accusations of abuse or mistreatment, moving to a new address without justification to make contact more difficult. So, for relief. What does it lead to as a consequence? Even though it's not a crime that would result in imprisonment, okay? It's not a crime, but it could lead to imprisonment. The practice is considered illegal, and the judge can apply various measures to protect the minor, including a judicial warning, imposing a fine on the alienating parent, granting more visitation time to the affected parent, ordering psychological counseling, and changing custody or suspending parental rights. Possible associated crimes, even though alienation itself does not result in imprisonment, related acts committed during the process can be classified under the Penal Code. Examples include false accusation, verbal assault, or slander and defamation. So, just so you understand a little, because there are many people who think it's normal in families for the father to badmouth the mother in front of the child, or the mother to say, your father is worthless, your father is no good, your father is nothing, your father is not a real father, your father is not a man. This is also alienation, okay? And when a grandfather speaks badly about the mother, all of this is alienation, people. We see it. Your father is not a man. This is also alienation. And when a grandfather speaks badly about the mother, all of this is alienation. And it can distort a child's psychological development into adulthood, okay? I brought up this story so we could discuss it since it's important. If you also grew up experiencing parental alienation, send me your story at storiescanaldejadepaula@gmail.com. Like, comment, and share. Kisses, and see you in the next video.